Hello and welcome to Shades of Murder. In this podcast, I explore all kinds of murder from around the world and throughout history. I discuss its many layers, and I trust that you will learn something unique and compelling every episode. Please be forewarned that each episode contains specific and at times very graphic and disturbing details of the case. It is not intended for all audiences. Please be cautious where and when you listen. There is an infamous quote or expression that says how a society treats its most vulnerable members is a true reflection of its character. It is an appalling truth that our society, in particular within the United States, does not show kindness and respect, nor do we protect those who are the most vulnerable. Those who need and deserve to be cared for and shielded from any harm the most, including children, the elderly, and the disabled, are the most prone to becoming victims of violent crime. This is the story of 20-year-old Mary Santina Collins of Charlotte, North Carolina. Mary Santina Collins was a vibrant and absolutely beautiful young lady. Like many young women her age, she enjoyed experimenting with fashion and makeup and liked music and art. Mary was not just like any other young woman, though. She was special and faced many mental and physical challenges since she was born. This was not glaringly obvious at first look because she was a really pretty girl, but her life had been an uphill battle. Mary Collins was diagnosed with DiGeorge syndrome, which is a rare genetic condition that occurs when there is a part of chromosome 22 missing. This causes different systems in the body to develop at much slower and poorer rates. It was Mary Santina Collins' beauty, youth, naivety, and open heart combined with her genetic condition that made her so vulnerable to the horrific events that unfolded. The details of when the initial interaction between her primary perpetrators, which triggered the crime, are unclear, but from what I can gather, it happened very recently, if not within a few days of each other. Mary Santina Collins had briefly dated 21-year-old Lavi Pham, whom she had known from high school. She, Lavi, and his new girlfriend Kelly Lavery had spent time together the last few months, and Mary believed they were her good friends. She thought they cared about her, and so when she was invited over to their apartment in the North Davidson Art District of Charlotte, which locals refer to as NoDA, Mary had no reason to be suspicious or uncomfortable. On March 28, 2020, 20-year-old Mary Santina Collins took an Uber which her friends had sent to pick her up and bring her back to their place. She would never be heard from or seen alive again. On March 30th, 2020, Mary's grandmother, Mia Alderman, who was pretty much her mom since she had raised her since she was a baby, awoke to find that Mary had never come back from seeing her friends the night before. She could not get a hold of Mary by phone or text, and it appeared as if her phone was off. Then she noticed on social media that some videos had just posted of Mary, Lavi, and Kelly. The three of them were seen laughing and excited to bring up their takeout sushi to the apartment. Sushi was Mary's favorite. There was a touching moment in the elevator between the two young women as Kelly sweetly grazed Mary's face. Mia Alderman thought, okay, she's fine. You were worried for nothing. She's having fun with her friends, and she figured Mary would get back to her when she could. But the next morning, she still had not heard back from Mary. This was not in her character to just not come home. She would never have neglected to call her grandmother and let her know she was staying the night again. Mary knew that her grandmother would be sick with worry. Mia Alderman knew something was wrong and that Mary was in danger. She rushed over to Lavi and Kelly's apartment asking where Mary was. Kelly claimed that, yes, she had stayed over, but she had left that morning around 11 a.m. Mia Alderman felt in her gut that something was not right, and she yelled out for Mary, stepping into the doorway of the couple's apartment and looking around. She was then asked by Kelly Lavery to leave. Mary's grandmother knew that she was not missing and that she had never left that apartment. She searched for hours around the apartment complex but came up with nothing. So she contacted the police. The police did what is known as a wellness check on the apartment the following day, but when they arrived, no one was there. Since the police knew where Mary's last destination was, and technically she was an adult, they saw her missing as no immediate concern. Granted, Mary Santina Collins had a cognitive disorder, so you would think being someone of a vulnerable group would have been prioritized. Unfortunately, in North Carolina, there was no system in place to alert communities to an adult having gone missing who has a genetic defect or anything resembling a mental handicap. An official missing person report was filed and an investigator was assigned to the case. Detective Gaskin of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police called Mia Alderman the next day to inform her that he was not going to be able to make it to the couple's apartment that day. Mary's grandmother felt suffocated with worry and felt alone in her quest to get her daughter out of that place. Mary was not missing. She truly believed that Mary was somewhere in Lavie and Kelly's apartment, trapped and unable to leave. Detective Gaskin had been briefed on Mary's vulnerable condition, yet instead of helping to find her, he told Mia Alderman that she was welcome to call 911 again. Feeling left without many choices, she did just that. She also connected with the manager of the apartment complex and told him that her granddaughter had last been seen on the grounds. He wanted to help her and began to search through the security footage. Meanwhile, when the police officers showed up at Lavie's house, he refused to let them in. However, he did permit Mia Alderman to enter the apartment. She alleged that she saw someone lying on the bed in the distant bedroom, their body seemingly tucked in. But Lavie claimed that it was just Kelly sleeping. Then when Mia Alderman returned to the apartment office, the manager informed her that the police had stopped his searching through the footage. April 1st came and went. Mary Santina Collins had disappeared without a trace. There had been no word from her for 5 days, and her family, especially her grandmother, were now in panic mode. They felt neglected by law enforcement, who seemed to clump Mary into the same box as many other young people who just wanted some space from their families. Mary was not just any other 20-year-old woman. At best, her cognitive functioning was that of a 14 or 15-year-old girl, which made her completely vulnerable to predators. Her disability also made it nearly impossible for her to leave for somewhere else on her own. Not only could she not drive, but mentally she was unable to understand directions or come up with a plan to travel. Yet the police did not seem to get this fact. Fortunately, the community did understand her family's concern, and they united together to do everything possible to locate the fragile missing young woman. They posted and handed out flyers of Mary's face and who she had last been seen with all over town. Different organizations, including those who handle sex trafficking, were contacted, and bloodhounds were hired to search for Mary in nearby grounds. The younger people in the family spread her story across social media platforms. Yet the police department of Charlotte Mecklenburg did the opposite of helping her frantic loved ones find their disabled daughter. When a local news station inquired with the Charlotte Mecklenburg police, they stated that they were not concerned as to Mary Santina Collins' whereabouts, and they did not believe she was in any imminent danger. Even worse, Detective Gaskin instructed Mia Alderman to no longer bother Lavie Pham and Kelly Lavery, as they were feeling harassed and threatened by her coming over to the apartment. On the 5th day of Mary Collins' disappearance, Detective Gaskin finally went there to search for Mary inside the couple's apartment. According to Detective Gaskin, he interviewed the couple and conducted a thorough search of their place, including looking inside the closets, and allegedly he lifted the mattress. But Mary was nowhere to be found. When he asked Mary's grandmother if she understood that Mary was not inside that apartment, she refused to believe that Lavy and Kelly had not done something to Mary. Whether she was still inside their apartment or they had placed her somewhere else, Mia Alderman knew in her gut that they were involved in her granddaughter's disappearance. Meanwhile, Mary's uncle had reached out to the CEO of the apartment community, who immediately approved his request to view the ground security footage, which they had within 10 minutes. Unfortunately, since it was now April, some of the footage had been deleted, but they watched every bit of footage they had within the time frame, which never showed Mary leaving Lavy and Kelly's apartment, as Kelly had claimed. On the night of April 4th, 2020, Mary's grandmother, Mia Alderman, was contacted by the police, informing her that law enforcement was at the apartment with an ambulance. Mia Alderman's heart rose as she initially believed this meant that Mary had been found inside and she was alive. She rushed to the closest emergency room, expecting the ambulance to bring in Mary, but she wasn't there. When Mia Alderman was driving over to the next closest ER, the police called her again to tell her that she was confused as to why they had contacted her. Her granddaughter had been found inside Lavy and Kelly's apartment, but she was not alive. When homicide detectives entered Lavy Pham and Kelly Lavy's apartment, they searched everywhere. There was no sign of a crime or struggle having taken place until they entered the couple's bedroom. When they stepped inside, they were hit with an overwhelming scent. Deep and rancid, it consumed them. The smell of death. When they realized it was coming from the bed, they ripped open the mattress, which had its springs torn out. Inside laid a body, wrapped tightly in plastic wrap, with several pieces of duct tape securing it. The wrap was drenched in blood, and the body was decaying. The autopsy on Mary Santina Collins revealed that her body had been mutilated from more than 133 stab wounds. Her day and time of death was undeterminable. The next day, Kelly Lavy Pham, and James Salerno were all arrested and charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. Lavy Pham and James Salerno also faced additional charges of unlawful concealment of a body. The Charlotte Mecklenburg police did not search the couple's house because they were concerned about Mary, nor did they believe the family's deepest fears, that she was in danger. It took a witness to contact the police about what they had been told by an individual named James Salerno for law enforcement to finally take the case seriously. The police did not believe the witness's story the first time, and it was not until the witness called a second time that law enforcement listened to them. Allegedly, James Salerno had confessed to this person that while he was partying at Lavy Pham and Kelly Lavy's house one night, Mary Santina Collins was there, and he watched as the couple dragged her into the bathtub. There the couple bound Mary and murdered her. The three of them then stuffed Mary's body inside a mattress with the plan to burn it later, but events did not unfold as they had hoped. Prosecutors believe that on the day of Mary Santina Collins' disappearance, Lavy Pham and Kelly Lavy had intentionally lured Mary to their place to murder her. Their previous attempts to seduce her into having a threesome with them had failed. When Mary rejected their sexual advances toward her, they decided to murder her in revenge. It was learned by investigators through several witnesses that Kelly Lavy had become infatuated with Mary and was actively grooming her so that she could take advantage of her. She spent time building up a strong connection with the young woman with the purpose of manipulating Mary into trusting her and making her believe that she was safe. Despite her beauty, Mary Santina Collins did not have a lot of friends whom she felt comfortable with, and her disabilities made her quite shy and lacking confidence. From what I have read, the idea of having a threesome was primarily the desire of Kelly Lavy's, and the level of insult she felt from being rejected by Mary pushed her into the darkest depths. She became filled with rage toward Mary, and she decided that Mary had to die. Investigators discovered texts between the couple discussing how they were going to murder Mary for turning them down. Once Mary Santina Collins was there, they acted as if they were all good friends still. Everything seemed normal, as indicated by the social media posts and videos La Vie Femme had shared of the three of them the next day. However, the events that unfolded that night were beyond brutal, revolting, and tragic. La Vie Femme and Kelly Lavery's plan began by dropping Xanax into a drink, which they offered to Mary. She happily accepted the drink and continued to hang out, talking with her friends on the couch. Before long, though, Mary began to become very drowsy and didn't know what was happening to her. Then she suddenly tilted over and fell asleep. La Vie Femme and Kelly Lavery dragged her petite frame into their bathtub. They tied her up so she could not move in case she awakened. Kelly Lavery grabbed a knife and began to slash at Mary. The couple brutally attacked the defenseless young woman. She and Lavie cut her everywhere, stabbing her body over and over again until Mary was mutilated and coated in guts and blood. They let her bleed out alone inside their tub. Later that evening, La Vie Femme and their friend James Salerno called a new girlfriend of James, 18-year-old America Deal, whom he had recently met through Tinder. He asked her to help them conceal the body and clean up what was undoubtedly an extremely bloody and gruesome crime scene. Investigators discovered that dish detergent and pumpkin spice shower gel were used in an attempt to prevent the smell of decomposition. Lavie and James then wrapped Mary's tiny 110-pound body with saran wrap and duct tape in hopes that the blood would not seep through the mattress. They had planned on burning the mattress within the next few days, but then Mary's grandmother kept showing up and got the police and the entire community involved. America Deal would not be discovered as one of the 4 people involved in the death of Mary Santina Collins for several more months. She turned herself into the police station in Thornton, Colorado, where she had fled after participating in the concealment and cleanup of Mary's murder. She was charged with accessory after the fact and assisting in the concealment of a body. According to North Carolina legislation, an accessory after the fact to a felony can be charged with a crime and be indicted and convicted together with the principal felon, or after the principal felon has been convicted, or they can be indicted and convicted for the felony whether the principal felon is found guilty or innocent, or the individual may not be held responsible and face charges in a court of law at all. In other words, it is up to the prosecutor to decide on whether or not they will hold the individual accountable and face formal charges. If the person is convicted of the offense, their sentence will be 2 classes lower than the crime the primary felon committed. For accessory after the fact for first-degree murder, an individual would face the maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Ironically, in an attempt to discourage judges from offering bail to suspects of homicide, the police in Charlotte changed their methods of monitoring by eliminating the assignment of electronic ankle bracelets. This active change in policy was never discussed with judges or magistrates before it went into effect. Due to this new policy, in addition to most likely the factors of gender, age, a lack of criminal history, and how she turned herself in, and her willingness to make a statement, the lawyer for America Deal effectively made an argument for her to make bond. America Deal was given strict parameters for her bond release set by the judge, who was completely unaware that the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department was no longer actively monitoring murder suspects. She was supposed to not be allowed to leave the county, have a curfew of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and was to attend psychological counseling within 30 days of release. due to the decision made by the CMPD without the judge's knowledge. None of these rules would apply to Mary Deal. She was freed without any supervision and has since left the state to live with her mother in South Carolina. Prosecutors presented evidence that James Salerno's phone records proved that he was in the couple's apartment during and after the time frame when Mary Santina Collins was attacked and murdered. His phone also showed a notes app that had items on it proven to have been used to clean up the crime scene, like detergent and bleach. His defense attorney made the argument that not only was there no DNA or forensic evidence showing that James Salerno was involved in Mary's murder, but that he had no motive to harm her. However, according to Mary's grandmother, Mia Alderman, who along with 7 members of her family and friends attended his bail hearing, James Salerno was cruel to Mary, and she felt very uncomfortable around him. The investigation also revealed text messages from Kelly Lavery that were abusive and bullying toward Mary. It makes you wonder what was going on in Mary Santina Collins' mind that she thought they cared about her, given how they were treating her. It would make more sense to me if she had not come from the loving and supportive home environment she had. Maybe it was just as simple as she desperately wanted to fit in and have friends. Kelly Lavery, despite how disgusting and evil her acts were that she committed against Mary, must have either had some level of conscience and guilt, or she was advised that it was in her best interest to accept a plea bargain instead of going to trial. It was probably the latter, but at least she owned up to what she did and took some kind of responsibility, no matter her reasoning or purpose, unlike the rest of Mary Santina Collins' offenders. Don't get me wrong, she does not deserve to ever have the possibility to live outside of a prison cell, and I hope she's miserable. But at least one person in this crime confessed to what they did. Nothing will ever condone or explain how she could harm such an innocent, beautiful young person in the most brutal of ways. I would expect, given the premeditation of the crime and the aggravating circumstances in the case involving the abduction, torture, and murder of a disabled victim, that prosecutors would have pursued the death penalty. Kelly Lavery avoided a trial, and on June 30th, 2022, after spending more than 2 years in jail, pled guilty to second-degree murder, kidnapping, and the concealment of a body. She was handed down a sentence of 240 to 300 months in prison for the kidnapping and murder charges, and an additional 60 to 84 months for the unlawful concealment of a body. This equates to Kelly Lavery being faced with 25 to 32 years in prison. The earliest she would be eligible for parole is the year 2047, when Kelly Lavery will be 52 years old. Lavi Pham and James Salerno both have elected to plead not guilty and go to trial. In June of 2023, James Salerno, faced with first-degree murder charges, in addition to the concealment of a body, was subsequently released on a bond of $250,000 without any supervision. Lavi Pham remains in jail while awaiting his trial. From the lens of criminology, it is very difficult to comprehend what motivated the offenders or what their mental state was, since there is very little known about their background. It is clearly evident by their heinous action that all 4 offenders involved are very depraved and sick individuals. They lack empathy, are vicious and brutal, twisted, and were completely delusional in thinking they could get away with this crime. There was nothing on record of any of them being drug addicts, but I would not be at all surprised if they were on methamphetamines based solely on their physical appearance. We know on the record at least what triggered Kelly Lavery and Lavi Pham's anger and resentment toward Mary Santina Collins, but that does not explain the level of depravity, rage, and disrespect they showed her before and after they murdered her. I mean, nothing could ever possibly explain why they were that enraged. Mary had turned down having sex with them. There's murder, and then there's stabbing someone over 133 times. Think about this for a moment. Think about the degree of anger and rage you would have to have inside of you to physically be capable of stabbing someone that many times. Just think about how exhausting it would be to do the same repetitive movement over 133 times. It is so beyond comprehension. What could have driven them to do this to her? That is a depth of rage and darkness towards something far beyond what one person did to offend them. That is an entire existence of anger, and as to what may have caused that in either Kelly Lavery or Levy Pham, no one is the wiser. What can be said about the other two perpetrators? What could have possibly motivated James Salerno and this young girl, America Deal, to be involved in this horribly violent murder and despicable cover-up when she barely knew them at all? None of this makes any sense to me, especially from what I gathered. Neither James Salerno or America Deal had a record. If they had a criminal history, especially one involving violence, they would have almost for sure been denied bail. Now, regarding Kelly Lavery, I was quite surprised to learn that she is the daughter of a very affluent family in Charlotte, who had to sell their plus $1 million home in order to afford her legal expenses. This makes her criminal profile somewhat unique for a female offender who exhibits this level of violence. What we do know, based on a lot of research that has been done on wealthy individuals, is that they commonly exhibit the traits of narcissism, Machiavellianism, which concerns the extent that someone is willing to manipulate and exploit others and circumstances for their personal gain, and psychopathy, which among many other characteristics includes a lack of empathy. These kinds of entitled traits have been reported much more in rich young white men rather than women, but maybe that is because criminality, even today, is often studied through the scope of the male. What is known about Kelly Lavery is that she was very spoiled, had no work ethic or any comprehension of what it meant to earn what she had in life. All of her expenses, including her rent and her phone, were all taken care of by her parents. Mary Santina Collins' family shared on their Facebook page how Kelly Lavery often bragged to Mary, as shown in text from her, about how wealthy her father was and how having a lot of money equated to her doing whatever she wanted. This is how Kelly Lavery lived her life. She lived off of her parents at 23 years old and was used to getting her way. Kelly Lavery didn't have a job, nor was she attending college. She was selfish, dependent, and lacked any real purpose or identity. Everything was all about Kelly, and if things didn't go her way, she turned on people. When she did not successfully seduce Mary, Kelly did not know how to cope with this, since she had always gotten what she wanted. Kelly Lavery had a history of violence, or at least one known official arrest for assault, only a year before she killed Mary. I could not unearth any additional details regarding the assault. Kelly Lavery was known to have been extremely envious of Mary's beauty, innocence, and inner light. When Mary expressed not being interested in having sex with her and Levy Pham, this made Kelly furious, and she wanted to destroy the beauty inside Mary that she could never have. She lacked empathy toward her and her disability, and if anything, she used it to her advantage to treat Mary like she was beneath her, as if Mary was lucky Kelly wanted to be friends with her at all. Kelly Lavery was such a psychotic narcissist that she was delusional enough in her arrogance and entitlement that she thought she could get away with brutally murdering an innocent, disabled young woman. Texts between Kelly Lavery and Levy Pham prove that the couple had been planning to kill Mary after she rejected their advances. But I still believe that Kelly Lavery was the one who instigated the entire crime. I don't doubt at all that Mary's murder was her plan. This doesn't minimize the roles of the other offenders in Mary's murder on any level, but from what I have researched, it was Kelly Lavery who was the one to lure her to the apartment and initiate Mary's execution. If it weren't for the fearlessness and endless bravery of Mia Alderman and the rest of Mary's loved ones, Kelly Lavery may have gotten away with it thanks to the disregard and neglect exhibited by the Charlotte Mecklenburg police. When Kelly Lavery was arrested and charged, she was privileged enough that her parents hired as her defense attorney the former Charlotte Mecklenburg Assistant District Attorney Mike Green. It makes way more sense that Kelly Lavery received a plea deal for such a vicious, premeditated murder, knowing that she came from a wealthy family and had the best defense attorney possible. The data shows us that the chances of being acquitted, or in Kelly Lavery's case, convicted of a lesser degree of murder, are exponentially higher if a defendant can hire a private attorney versus being represented by a public defender. It is a disgusting truth that those with greater financial resources are treated better by the criminal justice system, from the bail process up to the sentencing phase, if found guilty. This is an infuriating case of injustice and what seems to be a lack of empathy and seriousness by the entire criminal justice system of Charlotte. As aforementioned, Mary Santina Collins had a very serious condition known as DeGeorge syndrome, or 22q11 deletion syndrome. This is an extremely serious condition that is second to Down syndrome in terms of its prevalence of developmental delay and congenital heart disease. Common effects of this condition include lowered immunity, heart concerns, a cleft palate or other facial variances due to poor muscle tone and issues with the skeleton, complications from low levels of calcium, eye issues, and autoimmune disorders. Other areas of the body that can be dealt further complications include hearing loss, kidney and genital differences, skeletal differences, delayed growth and speech development, and poor cognitive functioning, in addition to emotional and behavioral problems. The symptoms vary greatly from one child to the next. Some children die in their first few years of life, where others can live much longer, even into their 50s. Mary Santina Collins was born with a submucosal cleft palate, but had surgery to repair it when she was only 3 years old. The doctors believed that Mary may not ever be able to speak again, but Mary was a very strong and resilient little girl. She learned sign language and used her vibrant, outgoing personality to communicate what she needed from her family. When Mary turned 6, she finally could speak words, but her speech was forever impaired. It was mentioned by her loved ones that because of her disability, Mary would not have been physically capable of screaming to the same degree for someone to help her. This fact makes the horror of what happened to her that much more tragic. Mary Santina Collins had been thriving in many ways, despite her fragile condition, but her disabilities greatly increased her vulnerability to becoming a victim of violent crime. The National Bureau of Justice Statistics revealed that individuals who suffer from a disability are 4 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than persons without a disability, including children and the elderly. Women who are afflicted with a disability face the highest risk of being victims. Individuals with cognitive functioning disabilities have an elevated risk of being violently victimized over individuals with any other type of disability. One study conducted in North Carolina, where this story takes place, revealed that women with a cognitive disability were 4 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than women without one. It is estimated that as high as 90% of people who have a developmental disability, women and men included, will be the victims of sexual abuse at some point in their lives. Now, there was never any mention within her case that indicated Mary Santina Collins had been sexually assaulted. But given how mutilated her body was from that many stab wounds, I can't imagine it would have been easy, if at all, to determine. It is also possible, given the sensitive subject regarding the victim's disability, that this was not made public record. Considering how sexual rejection is what triggered La Vie Femme and Kelly Lavery's revenge against Mary Santina Collins, and they wanted complete power and domination over her, I would not rule out that they may have assaulted her in more than one way. As you can imagine, Mia Alderman and Mary Santina Collins' families are disgusted and beyond outrage by any of Mary's perpetrators being released on bond and giving plea deals. What I find so shocking is that Mary was, to some extent, targeted due to her disability. So shouldn't this murder fall within a hate crime in addition to the aggravating circumstances of kidnapping and torture? I am shocked that the prosecution is not pursuing the death penalty in this case because of all the aggravating factors, especially those committed against someone as vulnerable as Mary. I did learn while researching this case that North Carolina at the time, and as of this recording, does not have specific legislation within its hate crime laws that protect an individual who is targeted due to a disability or handicapped, their ethnicity, or their sexual orientation or gender. There is a bill called the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, HB 596, that was introduced in the third quarter of 2023 in the House, which essentially expands the scope and definition of hate crimes to include the aforementioned classes. It would also establish a database for hate crime statistics and to develop and implement training and practices for law enforcement officers to help identify, respond, and report such crimes. Similar to almost all bills and laws in this country, it is still in the early stages and hopefully nothing will derail it. Since 2007, North Carolina has had a missing endangered alert program, which disperses relevant descriptive information about an individual who has gone missing so that communities are aware that the person is endangered and they can notify law enforcement if they see them. However, similar to the silver alert, the individual does not necessarily fit the criteria. Under current law in North Carolina, a silver alert can be released to the public for young people with disabilities. But law enforcement does not do this every time because not every individual missing meets their strict criteria. This is something that must be changed. So those who are most vulnerable in our society are looked for immediately if they go missing, even if their last location is known. If that person can't be reached and the family believes they are in a compromising and potentially dangerous situation, then law enforcement needs to take their concerns seriously and investigate the circumstances immediately, not days from now. It is believed that Mary Santina Collins was possibly still alive when her grandmother first contacted the police for help in bringing her daughter home. But law enforcement failed Mary Santina Collins and her family. It would be 5 days later when a stranger's brave and persistent calling to the station gave them reason to finally take this young woman's disappearance seriously. I have never discussed an ongoing case because they often feel incomplete to me, since there is no real closure or a final ending to the story. This murder is strangely underreported. While reading her mother's blog, Voices for Mary, I was affected by her trauma, her suffering, and her endless cries for justice for her daughter. It broke my heart, and I wanted to be part of spreading Mary's voice. in some small way, I felt her story was important to share with you and to let people know the injustices Mary Santina Collins and her loved ones continue to be faced with at the hands of the criminal justice system in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mary Santina Collins' grandmother, Mia Alderman, and her family members have found the strength to place their anger and pain into a positive cause, to remember their beloved Mary and fight for justice for those differently abled, like she was. They have created an advocacy group called Mary's Voice, which continues to spread information around her case and advocate for justice for Mary, and also to help change the current legislation for those with disabilities. Every year between March 28th and April 5th, her loved ones ask that Mary Santina Collins be remembered in some small way. They ask that people leave a hashtag on their social media, show support on their page on Facebook or Instagram, light a candle, anything that is a reminder that this sweet, innocent soul was taken from their lives and this world far too early, and that Mary's light will never be dimmed. Thank you so much for listening to this heartbreaking, tragic story of Mary Santina Collins of Charlotte, North Carolina. I will never forget her story. If you enjoy the show and want to support me, the most simple thing you can do is make sure that you are following or subscribed on your platform listening of choice. Consider leaving a review and rate and share with fellow kindred spirits that you know would appreciate what I do. Until next time, stay safe. Watch out for shades of murder happening in the streets next door, and especially inside your own home. Shades of Murder was written, created, researched, and edited by Elena. Music courtesy of Pixabay by El Chateau Million.